Hey guys, this is EckhartsLadder. Hello and welcome to another quick Star Wars Legends lore video, and I recently got to thinking, was the Empire ever truly not evil? I mean, there are a lot of books set during the Galactic Civil War era, and sometimes if you forget what you've seen in other places, it almost seems like, life under the Empire might not be too bad. Then of course, we're usually brought back to reality by some sort of massacre of an innocent population, or slavery, or cruelty, or whatever else. Let's be honest, the Empire by design was rotten to its core. It was essentially Emperor Sidious in governmental form. Not nice. Lots of corruption, lots of violence, lots of cruelty, and ultimately a system designed to benefit very few people at the top, and in reality, ultimately only Sidious himself. That being said, after Endor, Palpatine wasn't around nearly as much. He got thrown down a reactor shaft, and in Star Wars Legends at least, he took a little vacation, came back after a few years, then was permanently destroyed. After Endor and Palpatine's presumptive death, the Empire took many different forms, and it's very hard to track a distinct lineage for the Empire just because of how it fractured and the different warlord empires that sprung up. However, even with that variety, it's pretty easy to say that most of these empires were still pretty evil. The early warlord eras saw barbarians like Zinj basically trying to create their own mini empires, which were not much better than what Palpatine had set up, or sometimes were even worse. Under the Pentastar alignment, for example, the xenophobic elements of the Empire were brought out and even further expanded. After the warlord era, and especially the death of Thrawn, who perhaps represented the best chance for a good empire of this time, we get another period of darkness. The return of Emperor Palpatine, the Dark Empire crisis, and Operation Shadow Hand. Unsurprisingly, the Dark Empire was not an especially righteous organization. Palpatine pretty much turned up the evil to 11. He ruled more directly through the dark side. Things were not very fun for the galaxy, and basically his plan was to dominate every living being in the universe through the use of extreme power and super weapons. The death of Palpatine returned the galaxy to a state of chaos. Warlords once again emerged, but they were unified under Dala as she created a new Imperial Remnant. Dala herself was not very cash money. She was still striking out against the Republic, or the New Republic, for the defeat the Empire had suffered during the war. Even before unifying the Remnant, Dala, after emerging from the Maw installation, ruthlessly attacked undefended and non-strategically important planets, and the Remnant itself continued to aggressively attack the New Republic. Eventually, suffering many defeats, Dala would leave the Empire, and command of the Remnant, and thus the vast majority of Imperial forces, would fall to Admiral Galad Pellaeon, who I would actually call a good man. Not only by Imperial standards, but just by standards period. Pellaeon, like Thrawn in the Star Wars Expanded Universe, sort of got a more sympathetic treatment as the timeline went on. He definitely wasn't presented very positively within the original Thrawn trilogy, however later works, especially the Thrawn duology and afterwards, he, like Thrawn, would be described as an individual who favored law and order, and served the Empire because it seemed like the best organization to accomplish those goals, and because it was perhaps the only organization which could bring stability and safety to the galaxy. By 19 years after the Battle of Yavin, Pellaeon realized that the Empire that he had idolized never really existed. The Galactic Empire under Palpatine's command always was evil. It wasn't about law and order, it was about cruelty. What's more, Pellaeon was a pragmatist. He moved Imperial forces out from the deep core where they had been hiding in the last Imperial redoubts and brought them to the Outer Rim. In this area of space, Pellaeon would set up a new government, and what's more, he would formally end the war against the New Republic, signing the Pellaeon-Gamrasem Treaty. Pellaeon's actions before, during, and after this treaty showed that the Empire could be at least not overtly evil. Pellaeon went to great lengths to try to foster peace with the New Republic. There were several opportunities where, without his patience patience or his wisdom, war would have escalated because of outside forces. And when the treaty was actually signed, the two sides made a good faith effort to cooperate and to work together within the galaxy. This is something that I think a purely evil Imperial never could have done unless they were working some other angle. However, one thing that would always hold back the Empire was the Council of Moths. Although Pellaeon was supreme commander of the Imperial Remnant, the Council of Moths held a lot of power and was made up partially of Imperial hardliners. Still, Pellaeon, even in the early days of the Imperial Remnant, managed to abolish slavery, work against xenophobia, and eventually the Empire would even become a democratic institution, although that's not something that we'd see until Fate of the Jedi. It's really this point where I would say the Empire just straight up is not evil. They've got some, well, really unpleasant or unsavory aspects. There are still major structural issues within their government, and sometimes elements of the Imperial Remnant could be cruel, but Pellaeon certainly put them on the right direction. During the Yuuzhan Vong War, the Empire and the New Republic fought side by side against the extragalactic invaders, and they would even join together within a singular government known as the Galactic Federation of Free Alliances, mostly just called the Galactic Alliance. From here on, things get a little bit more complicated because although the Empire is technically part of the GA, they still function somewhat independently and there's still some sovereignty there, and the GA and the Imperial Remnant too would be a little bit more gray than either the Empire or the Alliance had been in past years. Former Imperials like Natasi Dala became crucial parts of the Galactic Alliance, and especially after Pellaeon's death, it's hard to describe the Empire itself as really good or bad. They did a lot of both, and the same is true by 130 years after the Battle of Yavin. When we talk about the Fel Empire, which is a direct descendant of the Imperial Remnant, and specifically Jag Fel and Jaina Solo, the latter who was definitely a good person and the former who I think most of the time when it counted was also good, although really into order and security like most Imperials. But that's outside of the scope for today's video, and that's all I wanted to talk about today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video on, when the Empire was evil and when they stopped being evil. This, of course, has all just been my opinion. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and make sure you let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. Let me know if you've got anything you'd like me to cover in a future video. Until then, though, guys, be safe, have a good one, and may the Force be with you.